I'll call the meeting to order. This is calling the meeting to order at 6 p.m. This is an ad hoc City of Danbury City Council ad hoc committee meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the J. Earl Associates airport lease. This is item number 3 from the May 2021 City Council meeting. Here in attendance, we have committee members Warren Levy and Fred Visconti. We have ex officio member Farley Santos. We have our airport administrator, Mike Safranek. We have finance director, David St. Hilaire. We have corporation counsel, S. Pinner. And we have representing the petitioner, David Kaplan, Robin Kahn, and Benjamin Thomas as well. And we have the tax assessor, Donna Murphy. So I don't think I've left anyone out. So the purpose of the meeting is to discuss the potential lease extension. Maybe I'll turn it over to Corporation Counsel just to describe where we are. This is our second meeting in regards to this topic, but maybe Les, I'll have you give some background.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, please. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Councilman Visconti.
Thank you, sir. Just for the record, I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but Engine 26 is going to have a pretty good sized building put onto their structure. It's going to have 4 bays, one with a lift in it, and the new structure is going to be probably about 10 feet, wind up being about 10 feet away from the existing driveway. And I just wanted to let everyone know that whether it makes a difference or not, I don't know, but just for the record that it's on there. The City of Danbury's already put out bids for the building.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Visconti. We can discuss the impact of that while we go through the discussion, if there is any. We can surely address that if there are any lingering questions or concerns. Thank you. So with that, Attorney Pinter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So just to summarize as briefly as I can, and people can jump in case I missed something or something slightly off. But the last time the committee met was March 23rd, at which time the petitioner was present and asked about an assignment of the lease to a condominium LLC, J. Earl Associates Condominium LLC. And so that was the request to the council committee. The committee recommended to the full council at that March 23rd that the assignment be permitted, conditioned on the procurement of a real estate appraisal that would provide the recommended or value of the rent that should be charged going forward, because there was a clause in the lease
I think Les lost his connection. Everyone else is still here, it looks like. So I think it's just Les.
16th. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you cut out, so we missed the
Oh.
last maybe 30 seconds to 45 seconds. Maybe you can backtrack a little bit.
Okay, yep. So the full council, the city council on at their meeting of April 6th, received the committee report from March when we last met. And they received the report and recommended that the assignment occur subject to getting the real estate appraisal, the independent appraisal that was required in the lease that would provide a basis for negotiation of a further rent in future years, based upon the assignment and the fact that the lease was ongoing at the present time and for another 2 5-year terms. And then so that was April 6th. On April 16th, Dave Kaplan sent a letter to the council president asking if the council would consider an additional 2-year rent extension, which would take the lease from 2033 to 2043. So that would be an additional extension of the lease. And that letter went to the city council with a request. And the May council, this was May 6th, the May council sent the issues, including the assignment, including the value, and including the additional 2 5-year term requests back to this committee. The only intervening factor was that on the 29th of April, Mr. Kaplan sent a copy of the independent appraisal that he obtained at his cost to the city and other parties. I forgot who the other parties were, but basically it was an appraisal done by Karen and Fazio, which was an appraisal which analyzed the rent situation and provided a recommendation, which I won't get into. We can get into that later by the parties who were reviewing that and who would make recommendations on that. So anyway, we're back here tonight for the committee to consider, number one, establishing the rent, if that's what the committee would like to do, to make a recommendation back to the next council to establish the rent. And then secondly, to consider whether an additional 10-year assignment, 5+5 assignment, as requested by Mr. Kaplan in April, should be considered and recommended and to the full council, I believe, for the June meeting, depending upon what the council committee decides to do here tonight. Final sidebar, the Planning Commission issued a positive recommendation for the extension of the lease through 2043 by report of May 13th, Mr. Chairman. So that's the summary. It's probably long enough. Anybody wants to add to it, they're free to do it, but that's what's before you tonight.
Thank you. And do any of the committee members have a question for Attorney Pinter while we're on kind of an overview of where we are? Councilman Levy.
Les, I was kind of interested in looking at that appraisal as well, because I don't think I saw any comparables, but it was, the appraisal was based on a very narrow appraisal, not what perhaps a market would assess it at. For instance, if you had the Danbury Fair Mall and you took away all the parking, then the buildings wouldn't be worth much. In the same respect, parking is very valuable. And how does it affect their tenants or how they're being in that building? Is it part of the original planning that they had to have additional parking, or why is it that they need the additional parking? Through the chair to the left.
Yeah, I don't know, and Dave Kaplan might jump in on this. I don't know if it's a question of additional parking as much as it is the assignment of the parking. If you have a building without parking, sure, that would be a problem. So in that respect, the parking spaces are valuable, and there is parking required under zoning for a building like this. But beyond that, I didn't compare the appraisal to the parking requirements and the size of the parking, because that wasn't really mine to scrutinize. So I don't really have any comment on that, except to say that there are a number of spaces there that can be utilized for the building. I don't know if they're all utilized or half are utilized. I really don't know the answer to that.
I think there's 33 spaces I read in there. I'm just curious. I really, just in reading the appraisal, it was kind of unique the way it was focused in on strictly the value. When I've been talked to developers in the past, and it's a very critical and expensive portion of the total asset. So maybe Mr. Kaplan could answer it.
when I purchased the property, it had already been subject to a long-term lease. And think of the building as roughly 40,000 feet. And to comply with the code, you would need roughly 3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, which would equate to 120 parking spaces. Without these 30 plus parking spaces, we're down somewhere in the 80s. So this building can't function and can't comply with code if those parking spaces are not part of the equation. So
That answers my
I
question.
don't know what the history, because I just don't know when Rodenstock extended, because the building was originally Norman Becher's and it was only 10,000 feet, but then it was expanded to 40,000 feet. So I don't know at what point they picked up the extra parking. I do know that when I bought it, it was just a dirt patch. I put in a filtration system. I paved it, striped it. I spent a lot of money on the city's behalf to improve something that I don't own, but I lease. But I was happy to do it in order to service my tenants better.
I would imagine that was somewhere along the line, a commitment in order to develop the property. A commitment had to be made to make that property available for parking. So
I agree. I agree.
Okay, are there any other questions from the committee members or ex officio members that are here?
Mr. Chairman?
Is that Councilman Rotella?
It is, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Through the chair, through you to Mr. Kaplan. The city did a deal about 10 years ago with Wing Biddle when Chuck E. Cheese was in town, and they needed extra parking to fulfill their obligations under zoning. They built a permeable parking lot adjacent to, excuse me, sorry about that. They built a permeable pad, but they never used it. They didn't really need the parking spaces, but they built them anyway to apply to comply with the code. And I'm just wondering, it's not often that I get between your building and the firehouse, but are you actually using all those parking spaces, or is this just another issue of needing them for compliance more than a practical need?
Number one, I would need them to comply, but
Right.
if you go by on a Saturday or Sunday, I have a tenant there called Gymnastic Spectrum. Maybe some of your kids or grandchildren have gone to Spectrum, but it's a great business and they've been in Danbury for probably 30 years. Mike and Kathy Nowak. The parking is so overflowed on a Saturday and Sunday for children's parties that I know people are parking in the Red Lobster and in the Olive Garden and just walking across, because those are my friends who are telling me, hey, Dave, the place is packed today. Can you add more parking spaces? So, I've gone through with different engineers. Maybe we can add some parking to the front. Maybe we can add some parking to the back. But we haven't really had the problem in a long time since the former upstairs tenant that did take up a lot of parking left the building. And it's only really on the weekends that we ever have this issue. It's not during the week.
Okay, I was just curious about that. You actually need and use all those spaces. Okay,
We do.
thank you.
Trust me, I'd rather save the money and not have to do it, but
Okay,
my tenants
right.
need the parking.
thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Rotella. Are there any other questions from ex officio members or committee members?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Visconti?
thank you, sir. To Mr. Kaplan, just for the record, again, I went to the site the other day and just to walk through a quick where the new building is proposed. Anyway, there seems to still be a for sale sign on the property. Now, is that for the upstairs part, or what's the problem? What's going on there?
I've owned the building for 18 years. I always had a for lease sign up there, and I decided, since the upstairs had been vacant for a while, well, maybe I'll find someone to purchase it and do an owner occupancy. And along came Susan and Frank McDermott, and they said, Dave, I don't even know if you guys originally thought you could buy the top floor, but that's what happened. And the day we're waiting for this assignment and hopefully the extension to come through, and then I'll hopefully take the sign down for it.
Okay, so that's basically what you're thinking about there is the upstairs, perhaps get somebody to lease that or buy it or whatever.
If someone comes along and offers me a great price for the downstairs, Fred, I'm going to take it.
Okay.
But right now, I've owned the building for 18 years.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, to further
Thank you.
answer that question,
Sure.
Attorney Robin Pond, for the record, I represent the McDermotts and their entity in connection with their purchase of the upstairs floor. The building is going to be turned into a condominium with 2 units, one on the ground floor, one on the top, and my clients would be on the top.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just one question from me to Attorney Pinter. I just wanted to confirm. So where we're at, just my understanding of where we're at. The last time this committee met and then the subsequent city council meeting, we approved the assignment of the lease pending the appraisal. But I guess the open question for this meeting primarily is the approval of the 10-year or the 5+5 extension to the lease, which has not been decided yet by this body. And then potentially discussing the establishment of the rent, but I guess according to what was approved by the council, that rent would have been approved subject to the appraisal coming in. We would not have met if not for the fact that the extension is now being presented to us. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, Mr. Chairman. Had the extension request not come in, we would have received the appraisal, worked out a value, and made arrangements for permission to assign without having to return to the council. Yes.
Okay, so I think based on that, I just want to primarily proceed with discussion on the extension, and then once that goes, we could determine whether, I don't know if it's necessary to talk about the rent, given the prior discussion on that. But Councilman Levy, did you have a question?
I didn't know whether you wanted a motion to that effect. And open up discussion on the main issue here, which are the 2 extensions.
Yeah, so I'd be looking for a motion for that unless, okay, Councilman Levy.
And through the chair to the Corporation Council, if I miss something, please let me know and we'll add it. I make a motion to amend the lease between the city of Danbury and J. Earl Associates to include 2 additional 5-year extension options to the year February 3rd, 2043.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Visconti. Is there discussion on this motion?
The only thing,
Councilman Visconti?
thank you, sir. The assessment, where does that fall into this, if it does? Assessment on the property, or I might ask the Corporation Council.
Yes, you're talking, Councilman Visconti, about the assessment and the payment of taxes, or the value?
Probably both.
I believe that the tenant pays the taxes here.
Yeah, Fred, I pay the taxes on it. Donna can probably answer the question. I think it's maybe somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a year. I think I pay in real estate taxes.
All right.
But don't quote me. But I think it's a couple $1,000 bucks. But I don't think there's an actual assessment assigned to the parcel. I could be wrong.
Right there. That answers my question. Thank you.
Just, Mr. Chairman, just to go back to Councilman Levy's motion, the committee, neither the committee nor the council is excluded from determining what the rent should be. I think going back to what you had said, Councilman Fox, had it not been for the request for the additional extension, it certainly could have been resolved without a return to the council. But the council certainly is not precluded from discussing and establishing the rental amount based upon an analysis and recommendation of the appraisal from finance or from the assessor's office. You're not excluded from doing that. So again, to go to Mr. Levy's motion, it could certainly add to that and a determination by the council of a final rent, or a determination of rent by the parties.
Yeah, I think So I would suggest maybe we amend the motion to include that. I think, just to pull that back, a question for Attorney Pinto. So based on our prior meeting, that would have been determined by the parties involved, not by the council, because we had we'd approved the assignment of the lease subject to the appraisal and subsequent establishment of rent. But I don't think in that motion, we stated that that was subject to the council's approval at that time. Right?
No, you didn't. And the reason I bring it up is largely because the additional 10 years extends the lease out a substantial additional period. So the council may wish to make a decision or a recommendation to the full council on the amount of the rent going forward for that length of time. I think the previous length of time was shorter. I'm just saying that you can certainly reserve to yourself a decision to establish the rent, or you can again defer that to the city parties, the finance department, the assessor, and others. That's all I'm saying. It's your choice.
If I,
Yeah, Councilman Levy.
being we're making a recommendation to the full council, the full council can determine whether it's an adequate rate of return to the city of Danbury or not. But as far as I'm concerned, the issue that went before for review to the planning commission had only to do with the extension. Certainly, it doesn't prohibit the council from doing anything they want to do. Basically, they can make any recommendation, and I wouldn't be adverse to putting an amendment onto my motion that would indicate that the council do that if they want to review the current rate of the lease.
Yes, so it depends on entirely on what the committee would like to take on to itself. If you just want to make a decision on the extension, then you don't have to do the lease rate. If you want to take on the lease rate, the rent rate, you can do that. So you can do it either way.
Yeah, I think my just thinking about what's already been, where we are in the process, I would recommend that we focus on the extension itself, given that we previously discussed, receiving the appraisal and how the rate would be arrived at. So my preference would be not to attach anything having to do with the rate and having this motion deal with the extension. And I would ask the committee members, and that Attorney Pinto, that would mean we wouldn't need an amendment to the motion on the table would not be necessary. Is that true?
Would not be necessary. Mr. Levy's motion could then stand because then you're just dealing with the additional extension.
Right. So that's my preference. I would ask, I guess, Councilman Levy and Councilman Visconti, in terms of discussion, if that's the will of the committee. I guess that's what I'm asking.
I agree with just doing the extension tonight.
I would go along with leaving it as is. At this point in time, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. We went through this once before. What I would like is confirmation from the tax assessor on some of the numbers that were put out. One of them is the taxes on the property. I think I read it was around $1,200 a year, which I would like that through the chair, the tax assessor, give an overview of the appraisal.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Levy. Ms. Murphy?
Yes, thank you. I don't see where this parcel has been split out with a separate tax ID and taxes are being paid with an actual tax bill. It might be included in the original lease.
No, there's Donna, there's a separate tax bill that I get, and I pay 4 times a year. I think the number is F-19004.
Because it's not separated out on any of our maps. I'm trying to say that.
Let me see if it's in the file. Might be able to. Whoops, sorry if I'm.
I've got it listed as part of the acreage as the regular airport.
Give me a second. Let me see if I can. pull it up.
In the appraisal itself, there's a reference to tax ID G as in George 18-1. I'm not sure what
That's not it.
That's the airport,
that's the airport piece. Okay.
correct?
Okay.
It doesn't specifically mention it in the appraisal either.
So
I think I read in the appraisal, it was $1,200, around $1,200. I don't know.
I think it's a bit more. For whatever reason, I have in my mind, it's about $550 a quarter, but let me just.
Well,
And various
based on
things.
the appraised amount of
Okay, so-
$9,800, it would be about $1,600 a year.
The,
That's what you're thinking of, Mr. Kaplan.
it could be. The parcel number is F as in Frank, 19002-4.
I'm not showing it. I'd have to log back into our system, but I looked for that and I did not see a separate bill, and I don't see where the acreage is. I'll have to disconnect to get it. And I'm not finding it in our GIS system either.
Hold on, let me see if I can pause. Sorry to do this to you guys, but
So it would be prorated, is that what, on the total parcel? Perhaps the total square footage of the parcel, and then prorate the footage of the area that is being leased?
Well, we would have split it out into its own parcel, that leased area, and it's not indicated as such in any of our maps that it was split out.
here are the tax bills. Bear with me. Okay, so it is the total taxes for the four, I don't exactly remember what 4 quarters of these are, but it was on the grand list October 1st, 2019. Total taxes were $2,359.80. So I was paying $589.95 quarterly. There is a gross assessment. Oh, Don, did you want the list number? Maybe that'll help.
I can't log into that while I'm logged into this. I'd have to disconnect.
Okay, well, it's the gross assessment is $85,500. And it's listed as Myrie Brook Road, 00. And what I'm going to do is let me print this and I'll forward it to everyone.
That would seem to be at about the right ballpark, given the numbers on the appraisal, by the way. Because if we're coming up with about, a $9,800 appraisal, and that's going to come up to about $1,600 in taxes, that $2,400 that you mentioned is about right, given what you're paying in currently. So in theory, that makes some sense, from a number standpoint. I think we just need to validate, what you're saying. When it's, who knows, this was done back in 2001? So they might have done things a little differently than the way things are done currently. So, you know, but it should be broken out separately in the system. And Donna needs to verify that. But the numbers itself, Mr. Kaplan, seem to be in the ballpark of where you would be currently.
So Councilman Levy, does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't, I
Okay.
just wanted a general confirmation, and I'm sure that once the documentation is all put together and finalized, that will all be, the Ts will be crossed and the Is will be dotted. So,
Okay, so I think we have a motion on the table. So is there any discussion regarding, further discussion regarding the extension of the lease? Okay, seeing none. Any ex officio members have any discussion? No. So we'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries unanimously. And I believe that's all the business we have for today. The chair seeks a motion. Councilman Levy,
move to adjourn.
thank you. Motion made by Councilman Levy. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Visconti. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Good night all.